All right, we continue to carve through spring football across the country, and in one of the more intriguing locales for a spring game, we look at the Florida Gators because, of course, we know what the expectations are. We know that they haven't been met recently. We know that there's much work to do, and Jim McElwain's the guy on the scene. So we bring in David Waters of SEC Sports Insider to look at what the Gators showed us on Saturday. David, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, glad to do it again.
Right, good stuff here. Let's start with the offensive line. Usually it's quarterback we might start with, but let's address the offensive line because I know that you're concerned. It's a point of emphasis. McElwain talked about it when he first took the job that they really needed to address this offensive line, but what did you see on Saturday?
That there's going to be much trouble if something doesn't get figured out, especially with these freshmen coming in the fall. What we saw yesterday in the spring game was not conducive to what you want to see an offense try and do to take off. McElwain's will have his work cut out for him. Defensive line, the backups on the defensive line just abused the starting offensive line, the backup offensive line. It didn't matter which five they really threw out there. They were getting manhandled most of the time. And, granted, Florida does have one of the top defenses, but at Florida, offensive line history, it shouldn't look like this. Going back to recruiting under Will Muschamp on the offensive side of the ball is really starting to show its colors. Some guys probably declared for the NFL draft that probably shouldn't have, but you still really only shouldn't have 7 offensive linemen coming into the spring. That's what Florida did. And Trip Thurman really couldn't go in the spring, so that went him down to 6. McElwain in his presser yesterday after the game, Rod Johnson got what people kind of thought was a stinger at the end of last week. Now kind of turns out they finally found maybe a previous injury, and now McElwain's kind of stressing that it could be career-threatening, and he's the most experienced offensive lineman along with Trip Thurman. Those guys were looking to anchor and, bring along the young guys for the offensive line, and you could really tell that those guys weren't on the field yesterday. They really struggled. David Sharp is now I'll go with David Sharp again, left tackle, but he played a little bit last year, but every offensive lineman that took a snap yesterday for Florida has never started an SEC game, and that's where the problem starts.
Yeah, with the D tackles and defensive ends in this league, that is not the place to be hurting along that offensive front. So that said, we're going to kind of temper our evaluation of the running backs and the quarterbacks because they can only do so much without the guys up front doing the job and paving the way. But let's go with the running backs. And what did you see out of the backfield?
Kelvin Taylor, we pretty much expected him to take the lead role, and he did. The reviews for practice, we didn't get to see a lot of practice. McElwain shut him down, but from all accounts, for people who were there and what we saw yesterday, Kelvin Taylor, this pistol offense, this one cut read offense may benefit him. If he can quit a little bit of dancing around, take the one cut, he showed yesterday that he can break a little bit of runs. Yeah, the offensive line struggled, but he still made something out of getting upfield, getting his yards. Adam Lane, the breakout star of the Birmingham Bowl, didn't show a lot yesterday. Mainly he played with the second team offense. Like I said, the offensive line wasn't doing much, and it showed with him as well. But he was injured a little bit. McElwain questioned his toughness, wanted to question if he wanted to come back or not, and it really looks like he struggled. He didn't really, bounce forward with his Birmingham Bowl performance like many thought he would. So that was really the only 2 running backs they had besides the walk-ons that they did. Brandon Powell had moved to a slot receiver. He ended up getting hurt this spring, so they held him out a little bit. So when Jordan Scarlett and Jordan Cronkite come in this fall, expect them guys to get some carries.
So looking at the quarterback competition, we know a lot more about Treon Harris based on the games that he played last season against big-time competition. And looking at the circumstances, he acquitted himself fairly well. It was difficult to step in there and make a difference, and he threw for about 50% and more touchdowns than picks. Then you got Will Grier, who we've heard so much about and haven't seen a whole lot of. So kind of assess the quarterbacks for us.
Will Grier looked to be the most steady quarterback yesterday. He led on the first drive, offensive drive of the game, led them all straight down the field. You can really tell that both guys really like the tight end situation there. And it's kind of Jake McGee, who's going to be he got a 6 year of eligibility back, transferred from Virginia. Didn't really participate, but Keontae Lewis, DeAndre Goolsby stepped in and had some really nice throws or catches from both quarterbacks yesterday. Both Grier and Harris completed some deep balls yesterday. Both similar stats. Grier was 8 of 11, Harris 6 for 10, not 150 yards passing around there. So neither one took off, but offensive line they were abused all day, and quarterbacks you could tell that while Grier may be the leader at the time, there may be some point they're going to need Treon Harris's athletic. Not to say Will Grier's not. He is athletic as they come for his size and stuff, but running for his life, Will Grier or Treon Harris, whichever one starts, they're going to be running for their life. So depth, McElwain's not going to name a starter at this point. There's no need to. He's going to need both quarterbacks probably sometime this fall. Hopefully the battle doesn't really go into the first game. You'd like to go ahead and name a starter and let him take off. But from what we saw yesterday, neither one really separated himself. Treon Harris had the unfortunate situation where his cousin died down in Miami, so he missed 4 practices, got a little behind the 8 ball. So Grier's got a little bit of leg up in the new offense. And probably, if you had to name a number one right now, would be Grier.
Okay, we know what we've gotten out of this Gator defense, although Will Muschamp is back to being a defensive coordinator for a reason. He couldn't win enough games, 4-8, 7-5 the last 2 seasons. The defense, aside from a couple spotty performances here and there, and mostly that's attributed to the offense and the constant 3 and outs, the defense has been Florida type of defense in 2013 and 14. You lose one of the better players in the nation going to the NFL draft, but besides that, size us up on defense.
Alex McAllister started off the game yesterday and in great form, trying to take over for Dante Fowler. He had what a would-be sack, what a sack would be in a spring game early. John Bullard really looked good. Taven Bryan, a redshirt freshman, he really impressive spring from all accounts. I think 6 tackles yesterday and really inserted himself. Joey Ivey, a guy who's really been able, not been able to get on the field much under Muschamp. He had a nice spring from all accounts. So defensive line, they're going to have a good bit of rotation there. Tackle and Brian Cox Jr. didn't participate in spring at all, but he can be counted on. So they're going to have a good rotation there on the defensive line. Moving to linebacker, Antonio Morrison, the real bad leg injury he had in the Birmingham Bowl. Jared Davis, both of those guys didn't participate in spring. And I'm not going to say it's too bad of a thing. Those guys were kind of proven, so they needed to get a little bit more depth at linebacker anyway. So Matt Rowland, who's never really been able to be healthy to stay on the field, finally stays healthy this spring. Real nice spring game. Had many tackles, a forced fumble. Alex Anzalone, big 5-star guy from 2 years ago, another guy who couldn't stay healthy, finally out there making plays. Daniel McMillan yesterday should have had an interception, dropped it. But for all accounts, linebackers really inserted themselves. There's going to be plenty of depth there behind Jared Davis and Antonio Morrison. DBs at Florida, never a problem. Probably going to be one of the best in the nation this year. Vernon Hargraves, Jalen Tabor, Marcus May. Those guys, and many more, they're going to be fighting for positions. I think you'll see 5 on the field at most times, maybe even move them. That's, like I said, a little bit of problem at linebacker with depth maybe, so you might see some of those guys move in the box a little bit. But I think you'll see it be more aggressive this fall. We didn't really see that in the spring or yesterday. Jeff Collins, the defensive coordinator, from Mississippi State last year, tends to be more aggressive. Florida didn't really show a lot of aggressiveness under Muschamp, so I think you're going to see maybe the defense try and help out the offense a little bit more, kind of create more turnovers, get them in better field position. And I think that's what we'll see. We didn't see a lot of it yesterday, but it'll be more aggressive in the fall.
David Waters joins us from SEC Sports Insider. Of course, David, anytime a new coach comes in, after some evaluation period, after we get to see him work with the team now for 6 weeks and see the display in the spring game of what was the progression and the progress during the spring, the question is, okay, what is this coach doing differently than the other coach? What's his personality bring, his scheme, his approach to the game, his philosophy? So any noticeable differences that you can see in a Jim McElwain football team versus a Will Muschamp team?
Offensive line wasn't as great under Will Muschamp either. But I think what we saw yesterday under McElwain was there's going to be some creative plays and some creativity that I think he'll try and mask what the offensive line is deficient in. There's going to be some screen passes. We've seen reverses with Demarcus Robinson and quick passes to the tight end. They used the tight ends a lot yesterday. Now, I'm not sure if that's because they don't have great confidence in the receivers or there's actually a lot more talent at tight end. But it looks like they're trying to find ways to match the deficiency at offensive line. From all accounts, the recruiting trail is pretty hot for Florida right now. They've gotten some quicker number of recruits than they had this time last year. McElwain seems to be a little more hidden, I would say, from the media. He doesn't really, put out much about injuries, and what he said about Rod Johnson yesterday was probably the most we've heard about that. He still hasn't really said much about Antonio Morrison, of what the extent of his leg injury was. The spat kind of started a couple weeks ago between McElwain and Muschamp. McElwain was asked about the offensive line. He was saying, just kind of the hand we were dealt. And we got what we have, and I guess Muschamp kind of took that as a shot. And he said Muschamp said McElwain said, well, he can win with his dog. Does he like his dog better than his players? So it's kind of been a little verbal spat. Not really one. McElwain's kind of covering, I guess, himself, tempering expectations. He sees the numbers at offensive line and other positions on the field where it may not be conducive to a quick turnaround. So, the spat probably has to stop at some point. Muschamp needs to move on. McElwain needs to, just concentrate on what he has and move on from there. But it's fun for the fans and the media for a little while. So, when there's no football, I guess give us another storyline to go with.
I know we got such a long break between first week of January and trying to get to September that we need something to spice it up. We get a little spring football, but sometimes it's difficult to watch these guys go up against each other. So, hey, let the coaches go at it, and we can see who's going to come out. It's all going to come out in the mix and come out in the wash, as they say, when they start putting on the pads for real and hitting with a little hatred this fall. So got David Waters from SEC Sports Insider. David, we know the allergies are kicking up, so we appreciate it's not easy spitting out like 15, 18 minutes of information and personnel with while you're battling that. So thanks so much for that. I'm going to make this simple, David. It seems like if you look at this football team, sure, you need to solve some things at wide receiver. You mentioned some depth issues on defense, but it seems like if you get consistent play at quarterback and you can block up front on the offensive line, it seems like it's coming down to quarterback and offensive line between what might be a 6-win team and maybe a 9 or 10-win team.
Yeah, I think that's right to say. And I think if the defense, could put the offense in good situations, at least this offense needs to be more opportunistic than the last offense. The numbers still may be the same, may not be that much different with the way they look, but when they get the ball in the red zone, score. And that seemed to be a problem in the Muschamp. McElwain maybe can fix that part of it. If you when you're in position, at least make a play.
All right, David Waters, catch him on Twitter. If you love the Florida Gators and the SEC, you got to do yourself a favor here and follow David there. Catch him on SEC Sports Insider as well. David, thanks so much.
Mark, thank you much.